March 9, 1945, Mariana Islands, Pacific Ocean. As sunset approaches over the American airfields on Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, ground crews conduct final inspections on 325 Boeing B-29 Superfortress bombers lined up on runways across the captured Japanese territory. Major General Curtis LeMay, who leads the 21st Bomber Command, has initiated a significant shift in bombing strategies for the Pacific War. In bomb bays overloaded beyond their usual capacity, crews are loading cluster bombs that contain 1,520 M69 incendiary bomblets each, filled with napalm that ignites at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The plan is strategic, yet it raises considerable controversy. 3:35 p.m., the first Silver B-29 takes off from Guam's North Field. As darkness sets in, the roar of our 3550 engines fills the air, with bomber after bomber ascending individually instead of in formation, modified to carry double their usual incendiary payload by removing most of their defensive guns. Leading this assault are Pathfinder aircraft that will mark the target with a burning X visible from miles away, followed by the main force releasing their bombs from just 5,000 to 7,000 feet, significantly lower than their intended bombing altitude. What happens next will showcase the immense power of American incendiary warfare and explain why Japanese air defenses, despite their resolve, couldn't stop the most significant single air raid in history. The American Boeing B-29 Superfortress had made its way to the Pacific theater as the most advanced aircraft of World War II. This groundbreaking bomber required over 1.4 million engineering hours to develop and represented a $3 billion investment, far surpassing the Manhattan Project's $1.9 billion cost. The four-engine heavy bomber featured innovative elements like pressurized crew compartments, remote-controlled gun turrets, and the most powerful piston engines ever installed on an aircraft. Manufacturing was spread throughout the country, with Boeing making bombers in Seattle, Renton, and Wichita, the Glenn L. Martin Company in Omaha, and Bell Aircraft Corporation in Marietta, Georgia. Each B-29 measured 99 feet long and had a wingspan of 141 feet, powered by four Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone engines that generated 2,200 horsepower each. The aircraft could carry as much as 20,000 pounds of bombs over a combat radius of 1,600 miles, flying at heights of up to 31,850 feet, with a top speed of 357 miles per hour. By March 1945, American factories had produced about 2,000 B-29s for combat units, with production ramping up toward an eventual total of 3,970 aircraft during the war. The 73rd and 313th Bombardment Wings based in Saipan, and the 314th Bombardment Wing stationed in Guam. These units could launch over 300 B-29s for a single mission, with each aircraft supported by specialized ground crews working around the clock. By early 1945, Japan's air defense system was notably underwhelming. The Imperial Japanese Army and Navy functioned with separate, uncoordinated command structures, resulting in poor communication between the two. Their main night fighter, the Nakajima J-1N Gecko Moonlight, had been rushed into service after being repurposed from a reconnaissance plane. It was equipped with twin 20mm Type 99 cannons that fired upward at a 30-degree angle and another set firing downward, allowing the Gecko to theoretically engage bombers from surprising positions. However, only 479 of these aircraft were produced during the war, and many had already been lost. The Kawasaki Ki-45 Toru Dragon Killer was another option for night fighting, featuring a 37mm cannon in the nose and oblique-firing 20mm cannons, but just 1,701 units had been built since 1941. Without radar for nighttime interception, these planes depended on searchlights and visual identification, which were nearly impossible against fast-moving bombers in the dark. Ground defenses were just as insufficient. Tokyo had fewer than 500 heavy anti-aircraft guns protecting the entire metropolitan area. The Type 99 88mm gun served as the primary high-altitude defense, while the Type 98 20mm cannon provided close-range support with an effective ceiling of only 11,500 feet. Most importantly, Japan lacked fire control radar for its anti-aircraft artillery, relying instead on optical rangefinders and sound locators that became ineffective in bad weather or at night. The statistics painted a difficult picture, as America could launch hundreds of B-29s from the Mariana Islands alone. By March 1945, the Japanese forces had around 200 operational night fighters across the home islands. Fuel shortages limited training flights, resulting in new pilots having little experience flying at night. Aviation gasoline was so limited that many planes were kept on the ground to conserve fuel for the anticipated American invasion. Major General Curtis LeMay took command of the 21st Bomber Command in January 1945, taking over a strategic bombing campaign that had not produced significant outcomes. Prior high-altitude precision bombing missions from 30,000 feet had been ineffective because of the jet stream, with winds over 200 miles per hour scattering bombs far from their intended targets. The strain on engines from ascending with heavy bomb loads led to frequent mechanical failures, as magnesium alloy parts often overheated beyond safe limits. Additionally, cloud cover obscured targets 70% of the time, leaving bombardiers to depend on rudimentary radar. After evaluating these operational issues, LeMay made a groundbreaking decision that would change the course of the air war against Japan. The new strategies were both bold and sensible. LeMay decided to remove all defensive guns except those at the tail, which allowed each B-29 to transport 7 tons of incendiaries instead of the usual 3.5 tons of high explosives. By flying at altitudes between 5,000 and 9,000 feet, they could avoid the jet stream, lessen engine strain, and enhance bombing precision. Conducting night raids would reduce the risk from Japanese fighters, who had neither radar nor well-trained night pilots. Each aircraft would navigate using maps and radio signals, attacking in a steady flow over several hours rather than in tightly packed formations. Weather experts predicted perfect conditions for March 9th and 10th, with clear skies and strong surface winds that would help spread fires across the target area. The choice of targets highlighted the operation's strategic intent. American planners identified regions where Japanese cottage industries were manufacturing aircraft components, electrical gear, and precision tools in small workshops nestled within residential areas. Intelligence agents referred to maps created by the Office of Strategic Services, which ranked Tokyo's districts based on their infrastructure density, drawing from pre-war Japanese urban planning records. The chosen area in northeastern Tokyo encompassed the Asakusa, Honjo, and Fukugawa districts, characterized by working-class neighborhoods with very high population density, where extended families resided in wooden buildings separated by narrow lanes. The M69 incendiary bomblet showcased cutting-edge warfare technology. This hexagonal steel cylinder was 3 inches in diameter and 20 inches long, weighing 6 pounds. Unlike earlier thermite or magnesium designs that burned at higher temperatures but could be put out, the M69 utilized napalm, a jellied gasoline created by scientists from Standard Oil and Harvard University. It was released in E46 ammable clusters containing 38 bomblets that separated at an altitude of 2,000 feet, with each M69 deploying a cotton streamer to guide its fuse downward. Upon impact, a time delay fuse ignited for 3 to 5 seconds before a white phosphorus charge detonated, spreading flaming napalm up to 100 feet in various directions. The delayed mechanism ensured that the weapon would be positioned on its side when it exploded, optimizing the dispersal of incendiary materials throughout buildings. Tests conducted at Dugway Proving Ground in Utah confirmed the M69's effectiveness against replica Japanese homes. The weapon generated multiple ignition points over large areas, with napalm that clung to surfaces and resisted efforts to extinguish it with water. Each B-29 carried 40 cluster bombs containing a total of 1,520 individual bomblets. Of the 325 bombers launched, 279 successfully reached the target, and Operation Meetinghouse would drop around 424,000 incendiary bomblets on Tokyo, resulting in an unprecedented density of incendiary devices. 30 p.m. on March 9, piloted by Mission Commander Brigadier General Thomas Sarsfield Power of the 314th Bombardment Wing. In the following hours, bombers launched at 52-minute intervals from 3 island bases. The 14-hour round trip would push both the crews and the aircraft to their operational limits. To adapt to the situation, crews wore lighter flight gear instead of bulky suits, taking advantage of the warmer temperatures at the lower altitude. 30 p.m., but most residents initially stayed in their homes. Previous high-altitude attacks had caused minimal damage, leading to widespread complacency. Tokyo's civil defense measures were insufficient for what was on the horizon. The city had only 18 concrete air raid shelters that could protect 90,000 people out of its 4.3 million inhabitants. 8 a.m. on March 10, coming in from various directions to outline the target area. Flying at just 5,000 feet, they dropped M47 napalm bombs that quickly created visible fire markers, forming a massive burning X. The main force showed up just minutes later, with bombers targeting the lit marker. Weather played a crucial role in the operation. Visibility was clear, with surface winds ranging from 17 to 28 miles per hour, although gusts hit up to 45 miles per hour. As the M69 clusters split apart and fell, onlookers described them as shiny metallic objects reflecting the firelight, a sight that foreshadowed unprecedented urban devastation. Within moments, thousands of individual fires ignited throughout the target area. The strong winds rapidly spread the flames from one building to another, merging separate fires into a colossal inferno. Ground-level temperatures soared past 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt glass and metal structures. The searing air caused strong updrafts that created fierce wind vortices, propelling debris high into the sky. Streets became impassable as asphalt caught fire and wooden buildings crumbled under the extreme heat. The roar of the blaze drowned out all other sounds, while smoke and heat diminished visibility to just a few feet. 24-year-old Yoshiko Hashimoto was at home in Tokyo's Sumida district with her 13-month-old baby when the assault began. Her husband, an army officer, was on guard duty across the city. Later, she would give testimony for historical records. The B-29s were releasing countless firebombs, and it sounded like heavy rain. I was amazed by the ferocity of the air raid since I had never witnessed one before. As the fires spread quickly, Yoshiko ran with her parents, baby, and sisters through streets crowded with people evacuating. The narrow alleys of Shitamachi turned extremely perilous as thousands tried to flee at once. In the chaos, parents became separated from their children. Elderly residents who fell could not get up. Firefighting crews abandoned their gear when the heat made it too dangerous to get near the flames. By the Sumida River, Yoshiko saw chaos unfold around her. Debris was raining down, and the wind was picking up. Burning materials, signs, wooden doors, and household items were flying through the air. Warehouses lining both banks of the river were ablaze. Her father pushed her and the baby into the water, a move that saved their lives, but her mother, along with Yoshiko's father and sister, Etsuko, did not survive. Throughout the burning area, similar tragedies played out time and again. Those who entered the canals encountered scalding water, while others were swept away in the surge as thousands rushed for water all at once. The winds from the fires were strong enough to carry people far from where they started, with some found at great distances. Police stations, hospitals, and emergency evacuation centers were engulfed in flames. At Kikukawa Elementary School, which served as a shelter, investigators later discovered only metal debris and remains in the ashes where hundreds had gathered for safety. Centuries-old Buddhist temples were obliterated, along with the individuals who sought refuge within them. The intense conditions caused by the blaze meant that even those in shelters were confronted with serious difficulties from the heat and smoke. The superheated air inflicted serious respiratory harm on anyone exposed, even for a short time. After the raid, different agencies reported widely varying casualty figures. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey estimated 87,793 deaths and 40,918 injuries. In contrast, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department cited 83,793 fatalities and 40,918 injuries. The Tokyo Fire Department put the death toll at 97,000, with 125,000 injured. Most historians agree that more than 100,000 people lost their lives, surpassing the immediate casualties from either atomic bombing. The assault resulted in the destruction of 267,171 buildings over an area of 15.8 square miles, wiping out 25% of Tokyo's structures. Over 1 million survivors found themselves homeless. The effect on industry was profound. More than half of Tokyo's manufacturing took place in small workshops located in residential neighborhoods, and the destruction of these facilities greatly affected the production of vital war materials. Thousands of skilled workers were either lost or forced to leave the city. In contrast, American losses were relatively small. 14 B-29s did not make it back, with 96 airmen reported as killed or missing. Some bombers faced severe turbulence from thermal updrafts generated by the fires, leading to loss of control. Others sustained damage from anti-aircraft fire during their low-altitude passes, though Japanese gunners had difficulty tracking planes at such unusual heights. Air crew members later reported noticing smoke even at their flying altitude. Those who had initially doubted LeMay's approach were brought to reality by the scale and effects of the operation. General LeMay later contemplated the moral consequences. "I guess if I had lost the war, I would have faced war crimes charges." General Arnold sent his congratulations, noting that this demonstrates your crews have the courage for anything. The impact of the operations quickly shaped American strategy. Within 10 days, similar raids targeted Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe, hitting Japan's 4 largest cities. The campaign then paused only because the 21st Bomber Command had run out of incendiary bombs. Production ramped up quickly, as American factories focused on manufacturing the M69. The gap between American and Japanese capabilities had never been wider. The U.S. could replace lost B-29s in just weeks, while Japan struggled to rebuild its devastated cities and replace its workforce. American industrial output was 10 times greater than Japan's, and the technical advantages made each American weapon far more effective. The $3 billion cost of the B-29 program alone surpassed Japan's entire military budget for 1945. By mid-1945, America was producing 50,000 tons of incendiary bombs each month, while Japan found it difficult to even keep up with basic ammunition supplies. The systematic nature of American military operations showcased a scientific approach to combat. The Chemical Warfare Service built precise models of Japanese neighborhoods at WWII proving ground based on pre-war architectural designs. Standard Oil Development Company produced napalm through thorough chemical research. Harvard and the University of Chicago provided analytical studies on fire spread patterns. This combination of scientific research with military strategy stood in stark contrast to Japanese military doctrine, which prioritized traditional values over material factors, an approach that fell short in the face of modern warfare techniques. Japan's struggle to establish effective countermeasures highlighted strategic shortcomings. Following the preliminary raid on February 25 that leveled 28,000 buildings, officials made little progress in enhancing fire defenses. Suggestions to create fire breaks by tearing down structures were never acted upon. Evacuation plans stayed mostly hypothetical. Military leaders insisted that civilians stay put, despite intelligence suggesting that large-scale incendiary attacks were imminent. This predicament stemmed from failures in inter-service coordination and limitations in leadership. The limited effectiveness of Japanese night fighter forces revealed a significant technical gap. Pilots such as Lieutenant Sachio Endo had notable individual accomplishments. He was credited with intercepting 8 B-29s, but these instances were rare. Most night fighter pilots struggled to find targets in the dark, especially when smoke reduced visibility. Lacking airborne radar, they relied on ground controllers who used sound detection, which became ineffective once fires broke out. The few pilots who managed to intercept B-29s often found their 20mm cannons inadequate against the bomber's sturdy build, unless they landed critical hits on the engines or fuel systems. Some pilots resorted to ramming attacks, sacrificing themselves for the chance to down a single bomber. Tokyo's fire department highlighted Japan's infrastructural challenges. The city had 286 fire engines, primarily manual pump units that needed several operators. Water pressure was inadequate for extensive firefighting, and damage to infrastructure hampered the water distribution system. Fire department protocols focused on safeguarding individual buildings using traditional techniques, which fell short against numerous simultaneous fires. When the blaze erupted, most fire companies were quickly overwhelmed, their equipment damaged and personnel compelled to evacuate. The psychological effects on survivors were deep and enduring. Many felt that established protection systems had let them down. Refugees leaving Tokyo shared their stories across Japan, revealing experiences that clashed with the official narrative about the war. Attendance at factories dropped sharply as civilians lost faith. The phrase routine air raid became commonplace as cities were systematically attacked. By August 1945, 66 Japanese cities had suffered significant incendiary assaults, with much of urban Japan heavily damaged even before the atomic bombings took place. The success of these operations shaped American strategies for Operation Downfall, the intended invasion of Japan. Military strategists estimated that ongoing incendiary attacks would destroy the last of the industrial capacity by October. LeMay thought that strategic bombing could lead to surrender without the need for an invasion. Estimates from the Joint Chiefs of Staff suggested that conventional bombing had already resulted in around 900,000 civilian deaths, with millions more expected if the war persisted. These evaluations impacted President Truman's stance on atomic weapons, which he saw not as substitutes for conventional bombing, but as possibly decisive psychological tools. The human aspect went beyond national borders. American aircrews carried emotional weights for years, grappling with their roles in the operation despite the wartime backdrop. Richard Ball from the 9th Bombardment Group could see the fires vividly from his plane, an image that stayed with him. Japanese survivors endured lasting physical and psychological scars. Families on both sides faced irreplaceable losses that impacted several generations. The raid left many orphans and widows, straining social support systems and adding to post-war difficulties. Recovery efforts showcased the extensive scope of the devastation. Medical facilities in the targeted region were destroyed, alongside schools, places of worship, and government buildings. By the morning of March 10, the landscape where eastern Tokyo once stood had changed drastically, with only concrete and brick structures left amid miles of ash-covered ground. Survivors combed through unfamiliar terrain in search of landmarks that had vanished. Recovery teams needed heavy machinery to clear the debris. Many victims were unidentifiable. Mass funeral services took place for several weeks. Waterways remained obstructed by debris for long stretches of time. The industrial impact was greater than initially anticipated. Tokyo's eastern neighborhoods housed countless small workshops where families crafted specialized parts, precision tools, electrical components, and mechanical fittings. The closure of these workshops disrupted the supply chains vital to large factories. The departure of skilled craftsmen, machinists, and technical experts, who had undergone years of training, became a significant loss. Worker productivity in the remaining facilities suffered as employees faced personal tragedies, housing issues, and low morale. The campaign's expansion unfolded in an orderly manner. After restocking incendiary supplies, operations restarted in May with improved techniques that enhanced efficiency. By July, B-29s were dropping warning leaflets before their raids, letting civilians know which cities were next on the list. These psychological operations showcased total air dominance. Such missions became standard practice, with many facing little resistance. Japanese defenses gradually diminished as skilled pilots were lost, ammunition ran low, and civil defense systems fell apart. International legal aspects continued to be topics of historical discussion. The 1907 Hague Convention covered the bombardment of undefended cities, but the distinction between defended and military targets turned out to be complicated. Post-war tribunals held some leaders accountable for targeting civilians, yet overlooked the bombing campaigns by allies. This set a precedent that military necessity could excuse impacts on civilian areas, shaping the evolution of international humanitarian law, even with progress in precision weaponry. Weather conditions intensified the effects of operations, showcasing how the U.S. leveraged environmental factors. The raid from March 9 to 10 was intentionally planned for anticipated strong winds after a dry spell. Meteorologists conducted thorough analyses of Japanese weather patterns to pinpoint the best conditions for fire spread. That night, wind speeds fluctuated between 17 and 45 miles per hour, varying by location, and surpassed some forecasts. This blend of meteorology and military strategy highlighted American operational methods. Individual B-29 crews had experiences that diverged from what planners expected. Many were impacted by the sheer scale of destruction visible below. Aircrew reported noticing smoke and atmospheric disturbances at their flying altitudes. Pilots navigated their aircraft through intense turbulence caused by thermal conditions. Some crew members later saw different assignments, finding it difficult to align their involvement with their personal beliefs. Some concentrated on the strategic goal of swiftly resolving the conflict. The Japanese military's response highlighted shortcomings in command and control. Anti-aircraft units were active but had minimal success amidst the darkness and smoke. Fighter squadrons conducted 90 sorties, resulting in only a few successful interceptions. Fire department leaders were not adequately informed about the extent of the raid. Military officials focused on safeguarding government and military sites while civilian neighborhoods were left to burn. Communication broke down as infrastructure was damaged, and messengers struggled to navigate the impacted regions. Post-war memorialization reveals changing views of history. While Hiroshima and Nagasaki became widely recognized around the world, the firebombing of Tokyo has remained less known outside Japan. Survivors fought for years to ensure their stories were recorded. Katsumoto Satomi, a survivor himself, founded a center dedicated to the Tokyo raids and the destruction of war, safeguarding testimonies that could have otherwise vanished. Balancing the commemoration of civilian casualties with an understanding of historical context has led to intricate memorial narratives. Today, military strategists examine Operation Meetinghouse to gain insights into the strengths and weaknesses of air power. The raid showed that simply causing urban destruction doesn't lead to quick surrender. Japan held out for another 5 months. It highlighted how technical superiority can bypass geographic obstacles, while also illustrating the challenges of distinguishing military targets from civilian ones in contemporary warfare. The shift from precision bombing to area bombing highlighted the escalation patterns in total war. Initially, 21st Bomber Command aimed for precise strikes based on existing doctrine. When those failed, LeMay switched to area incendiary attacks, which were easier to execute and had a greater effect. This development happened due to operational choices instead of clear policy shifts. By March 1945, attacks on urban areas had become standard practice, with targets chosen based on population density and industrial locations rather than specific military sites. Accounts from survivors reveal enduring trauma, with many suffering ongoing psychological impacts for years afterward. Children who were separated from their families often never discovered what happened to their relatives. Yoshiko Hashimoto's testimony is preserved in historical records. The memory of that night is always with me. My mother, father, and sister perished while my baby and I managed to survive. I think about them daily. The social fabric of working-class Tokyo changed dramatically. Extended families scattered, traditional businesses vanished, and neighborhood networks that had thrived for generations disappeared almost instantly. Ultimately, evaluating the Meetinghouse's function involves its impact on ending the war. Historians may argue whether strategic bombing was solely responsible for the surrender, but the raids undeniably hastened Japan's military downfall. The widespread urban devastation made it increasingly challenging to maintain resistance. Emperor Hirohito later cited the bombing campaigns and the domestic climate as influences on the decision to surrender. American aircrew following military orders, Japanese families in their homes, children separated from parents, and survivors grappling with deep losses. Operation Meetinghouse stands as history's most devastating air raid, not as a military triumph but as a stark reminder of modern warfare's destructive potential, where strategic aims can justify significant civilian suffering, and entire communities are drawn into industrial-scale conflict.